Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. This is episode 56 in season 3. This week I am joined by Doug. Zach, Denny, and Dirk are busy with other commitments. This week, after a discussion about some current events and related stories, Doug and I will review a marine accident investigation report of a line-of-duty death that occurred in Milford Haven, Wales, in the United Kingdom, where firefighters were conducting water rescue boat training and collided. We have had quite a few rescue boat accidents in recent years. There was one in Montreal in the Lachine Rapids. There was another one in rural Quebec a year ago, and there's been some others like this one, so I thought it was an appropriate subject. These are what I would call, and what Mr. Gordon Graham calls, the godfather of risk management, high-risk, low-frequency events. So let's bring Doug in and learn more about this event. Hello, Doug. How are you doing today?
Hey, Paul, I'm good. I'm tired. I seem to always be tired. I joked today that the last time I wasn't tired was about 15 years ago.
When you didn't have kids and work.
When I didn't have kids and wasn't as old as I am now.
Yeah.
You think I'm a young, spry chicken, but
you are.
I'm the oldest I've ever been. So
it's been a long time since we've recorded together, I think.
I know I was, as the listeners don't know, probably don't care, but I moved, got a new house, and my 5-minute commute to work turned into sometimes 30 minutes there, 45, 50 minutes home drive. And now I actually have time to listen to the shows that you guys record without me. So I've been playing some catch up and listening to a bunch of the previous shows, which have all sounded great.
Oh, that's
great. There seems to be a lot of like, oh, I wish Doug was here to argue this point because now we all just get along and it's boring.
Yeah, I think that was mentioned once or twice.
Yeah, it's mentioned like once or twice an episode when I'm not around. But this time I'm here, so maybe we'll wish that Denis or Dirk was here. But
that's right.
Yeah, sure. So I moved, which was busy, got all settled. I joked with someone that you're not a real big city fireman until you don't live in the city that you protect. So now I don't live in the city I protect. So I think that makes me. I joke that now I'm a real big city firefighter, but it's just got to get used to the driving. That's all. It's all new to me, but
yeah, no, I liked it. I liked. I did. Most of the time I drove to work.
I did some teaching. I did some teaching at work, which was cool. Did some ladder ops courses. Going to do some driving courses coming up as an instructor. Right now I'm doing 4 days of medical as a student researching, so it's busy.
That's great.
And overtime and whatever. So my wife's in Calgary with her mom, who's home from Vancouver where her mom was. So it's me and the dog here today. He's sleeping though. He spent all day at daycare when I was working, so he's tired.
He was playing all day. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's good to get back going together. The shows, the podcast is doing well. We're growing in listeners all the time, which is great. So we love to see that. And if anybody has any feedback, please feel free to give it to us. Some current events, I usually like to talk about that. I know something that's been going around my LinkedIn feed here is the British Columbia building code is approving up to 6-story apartment buildings with only a single stairway. So my fellow fire inspectors and I have been doing backflips over that because it was approved down in Seattle first, and that's probably why BC's approved it. But Seattle is an ISO Class 1 department and all that kind of good stuff. They got a lot of resources. But if we only have a single stairway in a rural community like Lacombe where I live, for example, we don't have the manpower or the practice to ladder that building to get everybody out or to get firefighters in a quick manner, or the equipment, though. Only have one ladder truck and the rest of them are all half an hour away or more. So that's something that's been a bit of a concern on the inspection side of things.
Yeah, and Seattle has multiple trucks coming to all their calls. Trucks being rigs. They also have multiple truck companies coming to all their fires.
Right.
They also have the godfather of engine company work. Maybe not the godfather, but the current guru of engine, one of them, Aaron Fields, who I think Seattle has basically adopted his way of doing things. So they can be very aggressive, and as a big city American department, throw lots of resources at whatever fire they have and do it the right way with engine work and truck work and predetermined assignments, and it all helps get water on fire faster, and it gets truck companies to victims faster, and they can.
Exactly. That's the big problem with a single stairway is firefighters are trying to get in, the people are trying to get out, and if you don't
Yeah.
have truck companies to ladder the building and rescue people, it's going to be a sad scenario. Anyway, something that's happening in the fire world.
That's another current event we could talk about is another big fire in London.
They've had two that day. They had two high-rise fires that day.
I was going to say, you said single stairway. So ask London Fire Brigade how things go with a single stairway.
Yeah, not that well. And the one was under construction or something, and they had a lot of problems with access because of all the construction stuff. London has, in the meantime, since Grenfell, which the final report's coming out again here, another one, but they've ordered a whole bunch more ladder trucks, and they actually send ladder trucks or aerial ladder trucks to all high-rise fires because previously they thought, well, we won't need it. And they also, this one, the big difference on this one, I think with Degenham or something court, is they evacuated the building right away. They didn't shelter in place. So that was the big lesson learned from Grenfell, that you need to get people out of the building in case the compartments don't withstand the onslaught of the fire from wherever it's coming from, inside or outside. So that was big lesson learned. Another thing that came out in the news recently was this. We all know about the fire in L.A. County. They went to a fire at a gravel pit in June 14th. A payloader, a wheel loader, was on fire, and they got called. Although they were called 28 minutes after they arrived 28 minutes after it started on fire. After the operator tried to put the fire out with an extinguisher, and the quarry workers tried to spray water on it from a water truck or something like that. 2 minutes into the firefight, using a pre-connected hose, one of the wheels, this is the second wheel, the other wheel had already blown up and burst and exploded, but no one told the firefighters that. And then the wheel blew up, and the debris killed the firefighter instantly upon impact. And so the LA County Fire has issued a safety notice to never get within 15 feet of burning heavy equipment from now on. So that's a new directive within LA County, and they're trying to pass that throughout the state and all over North America, is to avoid heavy equipment tires burning because it's such a violent explosion. We're used to tires and on pickups and cars and even semi trucks blowing up, but we're not used to them on a big piece of heavy equipment.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that fire too much because I'm sure next year we'll probably do an episode on it when we get back to that month. And we are more aware and used to small vehicle tires popping, but we don't, all it does is make you jump. We don't ever get injured from them. It just kind of goes boom and sounds like a gunshot, and you go, oh wow. I mean, it startles you for half a second, and then your brain goes, hey, that you've seen that before. That's just a tire pop. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
But as I said, I've been listening to some of our episodes, and it's amazing to me. There's lots of common themes in a lot of our things, but lots of them seem to be delayed reporting to the fire department, which then the fire department lots of times probably doesn't know it was delayed in getting the alarm. It hits start when it gets notified, not knowing that there's a bunch of lead up time. And it's just something, there's nothing you can do about it other than educate people that you have influence on to call early. But you have to, the only thing you can do is be aware that this might not be a 5-minute old fire, right? I mean, we're supposed to be notified and out the door and on scene in 7 minutes or something from NFPA. But that clock only starts when dispatch gets called. That clock could have a bunch of negative time before, especially if you're at a commercial building at non-business hours, nighttime in a small town when you're waiting for the one police officer that goes, hey, there's smoke coming from that building or something like that. But lots of times, too, people don't want to call the fire department because they think they're going to get charged.
Yeah,
So they,
or
no,
in trouble,
we can put it
or
out. Right?
yeah, we can put it
I
out. Yeah.
remember when I was in Lacombe there with you, we had a gravel truck or something, grain truck on fire in a field, and the farmer was kind of giving us grief that it took us so long to get there. In my mind, automatically went to like, well, phone your counselor and tell them you want a paid fire department. We would have been here 6 minutes quicker.
That's right.
But the other part of it is we come to find out that like the grain truck was on the other side of his farm from home, so it was like half a mile away, and it started on fire. And he got out and waited for someone to come in a pickup and go, oh yeah, it's on fire. Then they drove back to the house and got a bucket of water and drove back to the truck and tried to put it out, and it didn't put it out. So they drove back to the house and then they called. And then we have a 6 minute shoot time because we're all paid on call coming from work or wherever. And then it's out of town. So it's 10, 15 minutes to get there. So we can't control how far away you live from the fire hall. We can control how long it takes the truck to leave the hall, but that's above the firefighter's pay grade. That's if you're going to staff the hall or not. If you don't do that, and then you have 10 minutes of delayed notification time, you're behind. You're behind the eight ball to start with. But in a structure fire environment or a large commercial vehicle environment, you need to understand or think that this fire could be a little more progressed than we think it's going to be.
Yeah, that was a long way to say, but exactly. Don't delay calling us. You must have been in my little speech I gave. As you know, I was volunteering at a local museum. They had a big harvest festival, and I was playing a volunteer fireman for them. And they're starting all these old tractors, and there's old tractors. There's gas leaking all over the place, and they backfire, and all kinds of stuff happens. And then they had the steam tractors too, and so there's grass and straw and stuff everywhere. And I told everybody at the morning safety meeting, I said, if you have a fire, please don't delay. Don't try to put it out yourself. Call me first. Then you can try to pull it out or put it out, because at least I can get driving over to wherever you are and be ready to put it out quickly. I remember when I worked out in Clearwater, we had a big industrial plant about 40 minutes out of town or 30 minutes out of town, and they had their own fire brigade, and they had lots of fires. It was a laminated beam lumber company and stuff. And I always told them, I said, whatever you do, if you get a fire, call us right away. Don't wait and check it out first. Call us right away. We can always turn around. It's only diesel fuel. And trying to get that into their head to do that. So you're absolutely right.
Well, and we have to practice what we preach too. If
Yeah.
you're responding to a report of a fire and you see smoke on the horizon or smoke on the block, you don't need to get there before you call a working fire if that's what your department, or upgrade to a second alarm or whatever. I mean, we want the public to call us. We can always turn around. If it's nothing, well, we got to call our backup quick, and they can always turn around if it's nothing.
Speaking of smoke on the horizon there, while we were getting ready for the podcast here tonight, I saw a picture from the, I think, Port Coquitlam Fire Department posted a picture of the Portman Bridge, which goes over the Fraser River in Western Canada here. And there's a picture of a big column of smoke in the center of the bridge. And it turned out to be a Hummer electric vehicle on fire on the Portman Bridge. So they had to shut all the traffic down and isolate it while it probably burns for an hour or two on the middle of the bridge, where, of course, there's probably no water. So they had to bring tanker shuttle, which also made me think this week another current event was the Tesla truck apparently hit a hydrant down in Texas and then hit a hydrant and caught fire. They don't know whether it caught fire because of the water from the hydrant or from the damage to the undercarriage from hitting the hydrant. So interesting times these days. You said you had a fire. Of a fire at a department where the neighbor had a Tesla in the garage, and they used the auto park feature to with a phone to back the car out of the garage and get it out of danger. That's pretty cool. I've never seen that before.
It was kind of cool to watch. I mean, it was the fire I was at, but it was cool to watch the guy drive the car out with his phone. And the car was completely parked, and he fired it up. The lights came on. The car started moving.
Yeah,
all from his phone.
Yeah, I knew there was a remote control for those because there was an airport in the States somewhere. A guy drove his Tesla into a plane by mistake. He was moving it,
Yeah.
with his phone or something, and he crashed into a plane, and there was all kinds of lawsuits
I
and
saw
stuff.
a commercial a couple years ago now. I think it was Buick, where it was the people beside you parked too close, and you could back your car out of the parking stall
Without getting
without
into
getting
it.
in.
Ah,
Yeah, and then
cool.
you can get in. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay. Well,
technology. Eventually, they're all
technology.
going to just drive us around.
Yeah, exactly. I know my
Well,
son
my
gets.
my my buddy Kyle, Kyle,
Yeah.
who's in Lacombe there with us, was in San Francisco, and they have self-driving taxi cabs.
Yes. Yes, I've heard that. And they're having
Which,
trouble with
yeah,
them with emergency vehicles. Yes.
yeah, I've heard that they
Yeah.
they hit stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
very
Okay.
progressive city there, San Francisco.
I guess so.
Hey, in a
Yeah.
couple ways.
In many ways. Yeah. Okay. Well, we better get to this week's episode. So this week I picked a common trend just because of time of year. It happened in September, and it's something that fire departments do in September. Is on September 17th in 2019, two fire service rescue boats, a 4.7 meter Zodiac, like an inflatable, and a 6.4 meter, a bigger Delta, a rigid hull inflatable boat, were in a collision while they were doing boat training and familiarization on the River Clado near Milford Haven, Wales. So we just did a drowning episode. Was the last episode where there was a drowning during water rescue and flooding, and now we want to do. It's a high risk, low frequency event, as Graham Gordon would say. Right? Is that got the name right?
I think it's Gordon Graham.
Gordon Graham. You're right. Gordon Graham. Thanks for correcting me. As Gordon
It's
Graham
his
would say,
his fault for having two first names.
but it's a low frequency, high risk event because it's not something we do all the time, and it's very risky if something was to go wrong. So, Milford Haven is both a town and a community in Pembrokeshire, Wales. It's situated on the north side of Milford Haven Waterway, an estuary forming a natural harbor that has been used as a port since the Middle Ages. It's a large protected estuary that opens out into the North Atlantic Ocean on the southwestern coast of Wales. Population of just under 14,000 people in 2011. Milford Haven is the most populous community in the county with a population of 14,000. I said that within the community boundary. At the 2001 census, the natural harbor of the Haven was known as a safe port and exploited for several hundred historical military operations throughout the second millennium. The Milford Haven Fire Emergency Services was created in January of 2014 through an amalgamation of the Guysborough Fire Department and the Manchester Boyston Fire Department. The Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Services was required by Welsh Assembly legislation to provide flood rescue service within its operational area. The Milford Haven Fire Station had two rescue boats, the 4.7-meter Zodiac inflatable boat, which was numbered 207. So throughout the report here, this information all comes from the Marine Accident Investigation Branch. So this comes officially from the Marine guys, like the Coast Guard. This is their investigation that we pulled this from. Anyway, number 207, which was used principally for flood rescue. And a 6.4 meter, what's 6 meters? 3 times 6, 20, 30 feet. Delta Ridge inflatable boat rib, they call it. It has a rigid bottom with inflatable sides. Call sign Rescue 1, which was used primarily to assist firefighters in the event of emergency at the local oil and gas terminal jetties. On the evening of September 16th, 2019, a hazardous material spillage decontamination exercise planned for the following day at the Milford Haven Fire Station was canceled. The 10 firefighters scheduled to undertake the exercise discussed alternative training options and agreed to assemble at the station and take the boats out for boat handling practice and flood rescue training. This decision was made because two of the firefighters were due to travel to North Wales in a few days later to take water rescue boat operator training on the Menai Strait using boats identical to 207, which was the smaller of the boats, the Zodiac inflatable. Water rescue training, I mean, we just saw so many places here in North America recently, Montreal and Toronto, and down in Nova Scotia, there's been lots of flooding all over the place. So, these are things that we, of course, run into from time to time. The wind on the day in question was variable in direction and had a strength of force 1 to 2. Oh, I should have wrote down what that was. I don't know off the top of my head. Not too windy. Temperature was about 19 Celsius and the visibility was clear. The Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Service has a legal responsibility under the Fire Rescue Services Act 2004 to make provision for firefighting purposes to protect life and property from fire and to attend road traffic collisions and other emergencies. In addition, the Fire Rescue Services Amendment in 2017 was introduced, a duty requiring the fire service to make provision to respond to flooding and inland water emergencies. So leaving the deep water stuff to the Coast Guard, but to the rescue service, which is a whole other interesting agency in the UK. They have a volunteer rescue service all around the continent, which is well known. Anyway, and inland water emergencies. So number 207 was one of 16 Zodiacs purchased by North Wales Fire Rescue Service in October 2017 using a grant from the Welsh Government for Flood Rescue Service. It was one of 6 boats subsequently transferred to the Mid-Western Wales one. And in March 2018 as an equipment upgrade to replace older boats that had come to the end of their service life. Rescue 1 was a Delta 6.54 meter rib that came into service with West Midland Fire Service in 2001 to replace a boat that had come to the end of its service life. It was fitted with a twin 90 horsepower 2-stroke engine. So this is quite the little boat here, 2 90-horse engines on it. It was not fitted with propeller guards, and it was stored on a trailer at the fire station. The engine throttles and gauges were to the right of the steering wheel, in the middle of the console in front of the crew. I'll post a picture of the boats on our social medias when we publish the episode. So it had a bit of a seat in the middle that you sat on. It's like a horse you sat in the middle of, with a large windscreen was mounted on top of a console, the engine console with the steering wheel and the gauges and stuff, and was in the center. It was surrounded by a tubular framework. When standing astride the boat's jockey seat, that's what they call this seat in the middle that you sit on, kind of like on a horse, or a snowmobile. The helmsman view was not obstructed by the windscreen and framework. However, when standing, the helmsman was partially obstructed by this to the left side. You couldn't see. The crewman's field of vision was obstructed to the left if you were standing. The boat had a dual function of providing an operational platform for a fire rescue service dive team and supporting firefighters working in the oil and gas terminal jetties in the Milford Haven waterway. It could also be used as a transport platform to support an emergency response to the local offshore islands. So there's lots of little islands there. And so they had this boat in case they needed to transport somebody who had a medical emergency and they were called on to rescue them. The boat's crews, N207, firefighter Josh Gardner, that was the person who suffered the fatality, unfortunately, had joined the fire rescue service on the 10th of September 2018. Prior to this, he'd worked at sea on a small craft operating on offshore wind farms. He had completed the Royal Yachting Association Powerboat Level 2 training in June of 2019. The trainer on the boat held the rank of firefighter, and he worked in the fire rescue service since 1996. He'd held the Royal Yachting Academy Advanced Powerboat Operating Certificate that had been commercially endorsed, as well as a Royal Yachting Academy Day Skipper for Sail and Power Craft. He also had a radar operator certificate and a radio operator certificate of competency. He was also qualified to instruct both the Royal Yachting Association Powerboat Level 2 scheme and the Fire Rescue Services Water Rescue Boat Operator course, and would periodically act as an instructor at the Fire Rescue Service approved training schools. Several of the trainer's qualifications have been obtained by the trainer at his own expense, including his commercial endorsement. So this trainer was very engaged into water rescue boat training and working on a marine environment. The other crew of number 207 also held the rank of firefighter, had joined full-time in January of 2019, so he was a probie. He had previously worked on as retained part-time firefighter since 2013. He'd also completed completed the Royal Yachting Association Powerboat Level 2 training in June of 2019. On Rescue 1, the bigger boat, both the crew on board Rescue 1 were very experienced firefighters and held the rank of crew manager within the fire service. So that's like a lieutenant or a captain in our terms. As designated boat operators, they both had gained the Royal Yachting Association Powerboat Level 2 qualification and had completed the water rescue boat operator training at Menai, which was the academy the other guys were going to go to. Neither held any other marine qualifications. In addition to standard operating procedures, the Fire Rescue Service produced a appliance equipment technical instruction for fire service boats, so sort of an addendum to their SOPs, entitled Appliance Equipment Technical Instruction for Fire Rescue Boats. In this document, it stated, the service has a duty to make suitable and sufficient assessment of the health and safety risk to employees and provide them with comprehensive and relevant information on the risks identified. The document examines the hazards, risks, and control measures relating to fire service personnel when using fire service boats. And this was always a problem in every fire service I was on with boats was how do we assure we have adequate training? How do we assure adequate risk assessments and that the guys are safe both in training and operations? And this was a huge problem as a chief that we used to face. Section 2 of the document defined the qualifications required by the fire service to be held by the crew. SRT boats, which is Swiftwater Technician boats, number 207 was designated as a Swiftwater Rescue Technician boat. SRT boats are crewed by personnel trained competent to the Royal Yachting Association Level 2 as a minimum, which those guys had. If operating in swift-moving water, the crew must be trained and competent to the water rescue boat operator as a minimum, which some of these guys had. The RIB, the only RIB within the service, was based at Milford Haven, and the crews will hold the following additional qualifications: the Royal Yachting Association Advanced Powerboat Certificate, Radar Course, and Global Maritime Distress System Course. While the trainer in 207, the small boat, held the qualifications required by the fire service within the technical bulletin to operate Rescue 1, neither the crew manager in Rescue 1 had the stipulated qualifications required. Neither crew manager, there was 2 crew managers in it, they did not have the stipulated qualifications required to operate the RIB. It was Milford Haven's policy to undertake an internal annual verification of staff boat operations competence using qualified instructors from its own Royal Yachting Association approved and accredited training school. At Milford Haven, the last time this verification had been undertaken was on July of 2017. All full-time firefighters at Milford Haven Station were required to have completed the Royal Yachting Association Powerboat Level 2 of competency and the Water Rescue Boat Operator Certificate. There was no evidence found that the Milford Haven firefighters had provided any additional training since 2004 for fire. So this meant that firefighters had left the fire service at Milford Haven. The number of firefighters qualified for the standard to operate Rescue 1 was diminishing. The lack of sufficient number of firefighters qualified to the higher standard had been raised with regional management several times, most recently by local management in June of 2019. It's the same old story, right? We have this stuff, we have to train on it, and we can't afford the time and the money to have people do it, because the problem with boat training is you can't be on call while you're doing boat training. You got to be out of service, right?
Well, and part of me says, well, then if you can't afford to do boat training, don't have a boat. But it said they were legislated to have it and provide the service.
Yeah, it turns out they were legislated to have the little boat. The bigger boat they actually got rid of after this happened because they found that they just couldn't keep up with keeping the training and stuff going on it.
I wonder if you're a fire chief and the government comes to you and says, you must provide this service. Do you, as the fire chief, say, I'd love to pay for me to train my people? And but I mean,
Yep,
they might say,
exactly.
no, that's your job to figure out. But it's tough. If you're going to provide the service, you need to have people capable of doing it. So, and like you said earlier, low frequency, high risk. I mean, how often do they go out there on the water? And you might have people that are overconfident because they have their own boat and they go play around and they whatever, but they're not doing it in a rescue mode. And that's the same for operating a fire truck. Oh, I'm a truck driver, I can drive. Well, it's not the same thing. It's
Yeah.
different, but
Right.
it's definitely a challenge for administrators with limited budgets and limited people. Okay, now that Paul's given us some background info on the crew members and the town or waterway and the equipment, I'll talk a little about what actually happened. At about 0800 hours on the English way of saying this, 17 September 2019, or as we say, September 17th, 2019, the 10 teams assembled at Milford Haven Fire Station and were split into 2 teams of 5. One team was chosen to go out in the boats during the morning while the other manned the fire station. The plan was to swap the teams at lunchtime. About 0830 hours, following a short discussion, the morning boat team was split into 2 groups. One of the firefighters was also a WRBO instructor, hereafter referred to as the trainer, and he and the 2 WRBO trainees were assigned to N207. The 2 remaining firefighters, each of whom held the rank of crew manager, were assigned to Rescue 1, which is a boat, not a heavy rescue company like we might think it is. N207 was made ready at the fire station, then towed down to a launch site at Gelswick. When they arrived, the 3 firefighters donned their dry suits, boots, and Palm Rescue 800 buoyancy aids. The boat was equipped with the Nitro XT water safety helmets, but they were not worn by the crew. At 0938, the firefighters launched and boarded N207. One of the firefighters secured the engine kill cord to his wrist and took the helm. The trainer positioned himself in the middle of the boat, and the other firefighter sat in the bow. In the meantime, the towing vehicle and trailer returned to the fire station to collect Rescue 1. About 0945, N207 left Gelswick and was steered eastwards through the Milford Haven waterway and toward the Cledow Bridge. While en route, the trainer pointed out different types of buoyage to the firefighters, discussed tides, and talked about his plans for the morning. At the bridge, the trainer asked the firefighters to practice some swift water boat maneuvers. However, the flow of the ebbing tide at the bridge was insufficient to practice some intended rope and engine work. So they moved the boat a short distance upstream to an old fish farm structure on the south shore where the tide was ebbing with more strength. The firefighters then swapped places and the second firefighter took over the helm. At 10:50, Rescue 1 was launched with the 2 crew managers on board. Each was wearing a dry suit, boots, and Crusaver Offshore 290N inflatable life jacket. Rescue 1 was equipped with a Gecko open face marine safety helmets, but they were not worn by either crew member. The helmsman positioned himself on the port side of the boat. That's the left side for people who don't know boats. Behind the steering wheel, and secured the engine kill cord to his life jacket. The other crew manager, who was seated on the starboard or right side next to the helmsman, assumed the role of crewman and used the handheld VHF radio to inform the local Coast Guard that Rescue 1 was on the water. He also explained that they would be engaged in training activities in the eastern part of Milford Haven waterway and in the River Cledow. Rescue 1's helmsman steered the RIB eastwards under the Cledow Bridge and met up with N207 at the disused fish farm structure. During a shouted discussion between the 2 boat crews, it was agreed that each would make their way independently upstream, practicing operating the boats at high speed, and rendezvous again at Mill Bay on the south shore. As there were no speed restrictions in that part of the river, both helmsmen proceeded ahead at or close to their boat's full speed. Rescue 1 was traveling at a speed of about 28 knots and arrived at Mill Bay ahead of N207. which was being driven at its full speed of 16 knots. By about 11:15, both boats had arrived at Mill Bay and were rafted together, drifting about 20 meters from the south shore and pointing upstream. As they drifted, the crews discussed the local topography, the nature of the riverbed, and the local depths of the water. During the conversation, they agreed to proceed further upstream to the area of Laurenie and rendezvous again there. Shortly after 11:20, the two boats parted, with Rescue 1 proceeding ahead and accelerating to about half its full speed. Meanwhile, N207 proceeded upstream at variable speeds, with its helmsman sitting on the starboard side of the boat, practicing maneuvers that involved large course alterations. N207's trainer was sitting in the middle of the boat with his back against the port side tube, facing to starboard. So facing sideways across the boat. The other firefighter, Josh Gardner, was sitting in the bow or the front on the port side. Once ahead and clear of N207, Rescue 1's helmsman commenced a large full circle turn of the boat to port. As the boat neared the end of its final turn to port, traveling at 15 knots, the helmsman saw N207 ahead of him in the distance, slightly to port, and noted that now it appeared to be headed downstream towards Mill Bay. He decided to pass between N207 and the shoreline. As Rescue 1 came out of its turn, the helmsman's attention was briefly taken away from N207 and was split between operating the steering in front of him, checking the engine gauges, and controlling the throttles. After turning N207 to port and now headed downriver, the helmsman saw Rescue 1 closing rapidly in front of him. In an attempt to avoid crossing ahead of it, he pulled the outboard motor tiller sharply towards him to turn the boat further to port. The trainer saw that Rescue 1 was fast approaching and realized they were on a collision course. He shouted a warning to the helmsman and pointed at Rescue 1. When Rescue 1's helmsman looked ahead, he saw N207 close in front of him and attempted to avoid a collision by increasing speed and turning full helm to starboard. At about 11:25, despite the attempts of both helmsmen, the two boats collided. Rescue 1's bow struck N207 in the middle of the boat at an angle of about 45 degrees and rode over its buoyancy tube toward its bow. Rescue 1's helmsman pulled his kill cord, which stopped the boat's engines. The force of the impact threw N207's helmsman forward, which pulled out his kill cord and stopped that boat's engine. The firefighter in the bow of N207 was knocked or thrown into the water. He was struck on his head during the collision, and as the boat separated, he was seen floating motionless in the water.
Exactly. And so these kind of things where, you're facing a certain way, you're distracted.
All right. So the emergency response to the collision and firefighter in the water. N207's trainer immediately jumped into the water to attempt to rescue the casualty, but it quickly became apparent to him from the severity of the injuries that the firefighter was dead. Rescue 1 was maneuvered alongside the casualty in the water, and his body was recovered onto the boat using the onboard casualty recovery equipment. The trainer climbed back into N207 and brought it alongside Rescue 1. He then transferred into the bigger boat with N207's remaining crewman to assist. At 11:27, the crew manager, who had been acting as crew on Rescue 1, made a telephone call to the fire station watch manager. So maybe they're lieutenants and he's the captain, or they're captains and he's a chief, something like that. Different terms across the pond there. So he phoned the watch manager and told him what had happened. At 11:29, he called the emergency services, which maybe that's dispatch, I don't know, and reported the accident. While the phone calls were being made, N207 was placed under the casualty's recovery equipment and secured alongside Rescue 1. The deceased's body was then lowered into the smaller boat, placed in a body bag, and covered. Rescue 1 then motored slowly downstream toward Nayland Yacht Club. At 11:45, while on passage downstream, the crewmen on board Rescue 1 received a call from the local ambulance service to verify that attempts at resuscitation could not be carried out by firefighters and to inform them that they would be met on arrival. At 11:55, Rescue 1 arrived at Nayland Yacht Club pontoon, where they were met by members of the police, ambulance service, and fire and rescue services. The casualty was formally declared deceased by a paramedic from the ambulance service. All crew of the two boats were breathalyzed by the police, all recorded a zero alcohol result. A post-mortem external examination carried out by a pathologist a few days later confirmed that the casualty had died as a result of a severe head injury.
Yeah, tragic incident. And the thing that drives me, it's training. Same as we did the training one. You weren't on that one, LA, where the firefighter lost his balance and fell off the ladder truck to his death.
I just listened to it yesterday, though.
Yeah. Yesterday. So, a training thing. And we actually see quite a few common themes in this as well. So, in overview analysis from this Marine accident investigation report, the Fire Rescue Service boats N207 and Rescue 1 collided because they were carrying out uncoordinated maneuvers at speed on the same stretch of water. Neither helmsman realized the risk until it was too late. Firefighter Josh Gardner died because he was struck on the head by Rescue 1 before or after being knocked out of N207 into the water. This section of the report will analyze the circumstances that led to the collision, the reasons why the boats were being operated in the same stretch of water, and the underlying factors that might have contributed to the accident and resultant loss of life. Once the two boats had left the vicinity of Mill Bay, they were headed for the same agreed location near Loreni, with Rescue 1 ahead and clear of N207 until its helmsman decided to execute a full circle turn to port. Rescue 1, it's unclear why the helmsman decided to take the full circle turn given its proximity to 207, rather than proceeding upstream to the agreed-to rendezvous location. This maneuver resulted in the need for Rescue 1 to subsequently overtake or pass close to the other boat, which was conducting a series of turns under supervisions of the trainer. The turn to port took Rescue 1 downstream of N207 so it approached the slower boat from behind. When the helmsman saw N207 heading downstream towards Mill Bay as he executed the final stages of the turn, he thought it was going to cross clear ahead of him and did not expect N207 to suddenly turn in its path. The crewman was not keeping an effective lookout and keeping the helmsman informed of the location of N207. So as Rescue 1 came out of its turn, the helmsman looked up. He was surprised to see that collision was imminent. The emotional and behavioral response to being surprised might have led to delayed collision avoidance action, disrupted problem solving. This reaction time to implement this decision to accelerate and turn sharply to starboard would have been affected by the competence and familiarity with Rescue 1 and its controls. It's actually a good move to accelerate and turn the other way, but it was probably too late. The qualification to Royal Yacht Association Powerboat Level 2 should have been sufficient to drive the boat. However, the helmsman's lack of practical experience would have diminished his level of competence. Given the speed Rescue 1 was traveling, it would have been prudent to have planned greater passing distance from the slower boat, whose exact intentions were unknown. This is Gordon Graham all over it, right? I mean, you don't have the primed recognition, primed decision making because you haven't done it enough. You don't know how it's going to handle. The lack of an effective lookout and awareness of each boat's position led to the collision situation arising. N207 crew were focused on their training, part of which had been to nominate a member of the crew to keep a good lookout. You always post a lookout when you have multiple boats in the same area. With only two boats on the water in that locality, the lookout should have been able to provide the helmsman with information on Rescue 1's position, course, and speed. With that information, the helmsman would not have turned into the path of Rescue 1. On board Rescue 1, the crewman had not been tasked with keeping lookout and was not paying attention to the activity of N207. Had he done so, the risk of collision might have been identified earlier and brought to the attention of the helmsman, and the collision avoided. It's right in the Royal Yachting Association start powerboating, which is a basic boat level course. It says, when intending to travel at higher speeds, you must keep a really good all around lookout. Check it's clear before you turn, and be aware of other water users. So, pretty basic helmsmanship, really, for boaters. In close proximity with the relative speeds involved, there was little time to make decisions or take evasive action, especially given the level of competence and experience most of the crew involved. Any comments there, Doug?
Well, I'm definitely not a boat guy. I don't have one, don't want one, not don't ever really go on one, so I don't have a lot of personal experience to talk about. But and you might have mentioned it, and I missed it, but I don't know how big, like wide this river or whatever they call it was.
Immense, huge.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess if you're gonna practice turning and high speed stuff, then spread out a little bit. Or if you have two boats training, then why do you both have to be in the same place? You can leave from you guys go upstream, we'll go downstream, meet back here in an hour, or whatever. I just don't
Yeah,
understand why you need to be so close to each other if you're going to be doing all these kind of maneuvers and not. I mean, they didn't go out there with the intention of hitting each other,
of course not. Of course not.
but
Well,
it's got to be a pretty terrible feeling to any line of duty death has got to be hard on the department that suffers one. I couldn't imagine when it happens in a controlled training environment because of your own actions.
yeah, exactly.
That's got to be hard
Yeah,
to. And I mean, like, we talk as firefighters all the time that you take calculated risks and the ultimate sacrifice and like lay down my life for the life of another. But that all doesn't exist in training exercises. You're out there to learn how to use a boat.
yeah. No,
So,
I mean, this is covered in the next point that really segues nicely into the next point in the report here, where it says the fire rescue service procedures for any training activity required that a full briefing was undertaken prior to commencement. This briefing would be expected to include reference to any specific procedures related to the activity, any guidance and risk assessments, identification of a person in charge, and a full discussion of the intended activity. Because the decision to undertake this training was agreed to on the evening prior to the accident, there was little time to plan it thoroughly. The firefighters had assembled in the morning and held an informal discussion about the activity, but because there was no formal briefing, the pre activity planning requirements were not met. So, hey, let's take the boats out and we'll do some training, which makes sense. But I mean, just sitting there on a map and saying, here, this is you guys go here, you guys go there, we'll meet you back at certain time.
and if you say this was an immense wide river with lots of space, if you don't have that luxury and you want to take two boats out, bring radios so that you can say, we're doing this. You don't, I mean, this didn't happen in 1980.
No,
This
this is
happened in
2 years ago.
2019.
Yeah,
Everybody should, even if you don't have a personal radio, which you should, at least the boat should have a radio.
for
But
sure.
it even said that they use their phones to call everybody. They didn't even say it over the radio. So who knows? But I, I hate placing blame and quarterbacking, but there's kind of really no excuse for this stuff happening in this environment, which is harsh to say. But they made a point there in the part that I read that both boats had helmets that nobody wore. I don't know if those helmets stop a boat from hitting you in the head,
Well,
but
I mean, it might have
but they
reduced the
yeah,
injury. They didn't wear them.
yeah. That's why I always kind of
No, I
wonder
mean, this
why
kind of reminds me also of the plane crash one in Peru, where they did training stuff, but they didn't inform the other groups what they were doing, and people weren't clear, and they didn't follow procedures, all those kind of things, right? Additionally, it says in the report here, although the trainer was identified as being in charge of the training undertaken on N207, neither of the crew of Rescue One were nominated as being in charge of that boat. and no individual had been identified as being in overall charge of the activity on water that morning. Consequently, the morning's activities were not formally planned, and the role of each boat was not discussed.
And like I don't know if the activities need to be formally planned. I don't think there should be anything stopping a morning meeting, a captain sitting down and saying, "Hey, you guys want to do anything today?" And somebody going, "Oh, I'd like to go out in the boat if we can." Okay, fine, but figure out what you're going to go do in the boat. If you're, I mean, then you have to start planning what you're doing. It doesn't need to be a scheduled training event with like training instructors and the academy and whoever. If the boat is part of your station's duties, you need to be proficient with it. There's nothing. It's a good thing to say, "Hey, let's go in the water for a while." It's no different than saying, "Let's go flow some water. Let's go throw some ladders. Let's go stretch some hose."
But one person needs to be in charge of the whole thing,
Yeah, and
and they didn't
that
have that.
person is the captain or the officer, unless I guess they delegate it to somebody else. But you're in charge. If you're the captain or the company or the station, whatever terminology or department, you're the chief, whatever. If you're the highest ranking guy there, the buck stops at you. And that's why you get paid more money, because you have more responsibility. And that's you need to be the guy that when people say, "Hey, let's go on the boat," and there's open flowing icebergs, you go, "No, we're not going on the boat today." Yes, we'll go if there's a call and we have to. That's our job. But we're not going to go play around. Not that this was that situation, but maybe you say, "Okay, you guys, bring a radio and talk to each other. Make sure you know what you're doing. Be careful out there. Put your helmets on. Wear your PPE."
Yeah, put your
That's
helmets on and communicate which way you're going to go.
yeah,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
it's a tragic event that did not need to happen. Some of our episodes, some line of duty deaths are just in the wrong place at the wrong time trying to do your job. They're not, as much as some people would like to believe, you can never say that line of duty deaths are 100% preventable unless
Yeah,
you're going to not drive the fire truck, not go into burning buildings, not put your body under cardiovascular stress. All that stuff makes it risky, right? But as long as we're driving lights and sirens and driving in bad conditions and parking on freeways and going into burning buildings and going into rivers when people need rescuing, there's gonna be things that go wrong.
well,
But
but I mean, sometimes, I mean, we did that Sun Prairie, Wisconsin episode with the explosion, natural gas explosion. And I remember Denis and I saying, like, these guys did everything right. They did absolutely everything right at the call. They evacuated, they cordoned off the area, they did everything right, except for the guy going into the basement of the business that he owned because they
mhm,
were familiar with the utilities and going to go check it out. And then it blew up and he was killed and others were injured. But you get these calls where you do everything right. This is a training session where, and that's why we do the
100%.
podcast.
That's where I was going. Is we have the other end where things are gonna happen,
Yeah,
but in training,
it shouldn't.
I've said before, we have all of the control over what's going on. And a training event should be set up that you can just say stop and everything stops and we reset, right?
Exactly.
But
And walk
and there
through it.
needs and there has to be one of the ones I just listened to might have been the LA one. One of the recommendations was you have to have a designated safety officer. And I was thinking while listening, well, I don't think you need to at every training event say you are the safety officer and that's your only role. But I think it's like command, right? In ICS, you are everything until you tell somebody else that they are that thing.
Right.
So if you're the, but I can't remember what they called them. If you're the officer, you are the safety officer until you tell somebody that they're the safety officer. So you need to remember that and look out for things that are happening and say, hey, well, maybe don't do your turn right now. The other boat's coming. Or go, hey, they're doing their turn right now. Go to the other side of the river. It's 20 high science 2020, and it's armchair quarterbacking, and it sucks to do. But when you're the department out there on the water, keep this in mind so that you guys don't crash into each other.
Right. That's why we do the podcast, is to make people aware that these things are happening, and it's a watch out situation, if you will. Right. The conclusions from the investigation report from the MAIB report was, firefighter on 207 was fatally injured after being struck on the head by Rescue 1 when the two boats collided. We know that. N207 and Rescue 1 collided because they were operating at speed in close proximity when N207 turned into the path of Rescue 1. Because they had poor visibility, they couldn't see, they were training. It's unclear why Rescue 1's helmsman decided to undertake a circular turn to port in the vicinity of N207, but given the speed it was traveling at, it would have been prudent to have planned greater passing distance from the slower boat, whose exact intentions were not known. The crew were focused on their boat handling training, and the helmsman was unaware of Rescue 1's position when he simply turned sharply into its path. Due to the closing speed, his subsequent actions to avoid collision were not effective. Neither crew was keeping effective lookouts. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't know enough about like maritime law for, does the bigger boat have right of way, or the boat on this side, or whatever? Like, did one of them think like, well, I have the right of way, so I can do what I want, and they need to alter their course? I don't know if that was a thought they had or something, but
they don't talk about it here. But yes, there is rules of the road for which side you're supposed to pass on, which side you're supposed to overtake on, that kind of stuff. And they may not have been following those. Again, it goes to that whole training and familiarization thing. Every time we took our boats out training in Clearwater or in Fort Saskatchewan, I was always nervous, going like, what's going to happen? Do the guys have enough training? That's why I pushed hard to make sure we got boat operator training and we got the boat out, and we, to try to improve the skills, because it's just so risky.
It's an example of something that not everybody on your fire department should do. You should have a water rescue team. I'm not saying they didn't do this, but they should have a water rescue team that, because we said earlier, it's hard to train people. Well, if you have 40 people on your fire department, not all 40 need to be on the water rescue team, on the boat operator, whatever. And even on the team itself, you can have people that are designated operators and designated rescuers. And people might not like that, like, well, why don't I get to be on the water rescue team? Or why don't I get to drive the boat? I'd love to do that. That not everybody could or should or needs to do every job on a fire department. And like the more you keep the groups smaller, not too small, they can't operate efficiently and safely, but smaller, it gives those people more time at that task, especially for these low frequency, high risk events that you might get one water rescue a year. Well, you need to be on your A game when that one comes in, because it's a high risk, but it's like a high, I don't know what the right word is. It's a high risk for the patient that they need water rescuing. So you need to show up with your A game. Well, if everybody only has 20 minutes of training a year, they're not showing up with their A game.
Not going to be your A game.
Right?
You're right. Yep. No. Number 5 here, neither crew was keeping an effective lookout, so they lacked awareness where the boats were, their positions and movements. The Mid and West Wales Fire Service pre-activity planning requirements were not met. Its SOPs were not followed. The consequence is that no individual had responsibility for the overall activity. No one was nominated to be in charge of Rescue 1. They had 2 watch managers on there, no one in charge. No one had a clear task. Rescue 1 had insufficient crew, neither of whom held the qualifications required to be RIB helmsmen, and no steps were taken to prevent both boats operating in the same stretch of water in an uncoordinated manner. It was difficult for Milford Haven Fire Station, which operated 2 boats, to comply with the Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Service crewing requirements, which reduced the amount of on-water training and familiarization conducted within the 12 months prior to the accident. Exactly what you just said. If you haven't been in the boat, you've been in there shortly, you haven't had the training, you're not going to be an expert at it, and it's a high risk, low frequency. At the time of the accident, it's possible that Milford Haven's firefighters were suffering from gradual erosion of the levels of practical boat handling competence and a gradual reduction in their level of safety awareness for operating their boats, in particular Rescue 1. I think that's demonstrated by not putting helmets on. Is they general reduction in safety awareness of, hey, I could fall out and hit my head. I should have my helmet on. I just saw a lady on a scooter, adult 30-some-year-old, ripping down the street here in Lacombe when we were walking the dogs, one of those rented electric scooters, no helmet on. It's like, why? Why wouldn't you put it on?
And then you drive down the road and there's a paving crew that are all working with pavement on their feet and they all have a hard hat on.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always go, why do these guys need hard hats? Like in case a plane falls out of the sky, there's nothing above their head. They're putting pavement down on the ground, but they all have a hard hat on.
Yeah. The firefighters crewing the boats were not wearing head protection. Oh, look at that. It goes right into the next point. Although it's unlikely head protection would have been sufficient to save the firefighter's life when he was struck by Rescue 1, because you've got a 1,000-pound boat, with 2 90-horse motors on it, and 2 guys in it hitting you. It's going to be a big blow. The Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Service procedures for boat operations had not been updated for some time. They contained misleading information and made insufficient reference to Rescue 1s as a predetermined operational asset. While the standards for emergency operation will dictate stringent requirements, the ability to train and conduct familiarization under the same procedures was difficult, and at the local level, this led to the divergence from Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Service SOPs. Some port authorities were found to have made assumptions that fire rescue service craft operating in their areas complied with an approved standard. However, it was apparent that Mid and West Wales Rescue Service had overlooked the requirement to operate all of its boats in an approved standard or within a local authority or harbor area that complied with standards. This was a problem. One of the fire departments here in Alberta, they went out on a water rescue with their boat on a lake, and their boat actually floundered. It didn't sink, but almost. And they had a firefighter. There was a rescue call, and they ended up rescuing a guy, and then their boat almost sank. And another firefighter brought his personal boat out to rescue the firefighters and everybody and do the rescue call. There was a fatality involved, although the fire department wasn't blamed for the fatality of the people they were supposed to be rescuing. But they were in a lot of hot water. They ended up having to take a whole bunch more training, get a different boat, all this kind of stuff, because they were found potentially liable for having inadequate equipment and inadequate training to meet the requirements of the service. It's sort of like either we do it right or we get rid of the boat, like you said, which unfortunately, I hate to see a level of service reduction after this accident happened. They did put Rescue 1 out of service.
But it's like Dirk says, you need to be honest with the people, right? You need to say, we can't do this. So unless, Mr. Mayor, you're going to give us more funding to do the training or whatever, we can't do it. We're not going to do it half-assed. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it properly. And I think something that is a dangerous road to go down is using personal equipment, your own boat, i.e., for fire department duties, because what happens if something goes wrong?
Yeah, it was a problem. They had to go rescue their guys because their boat was floundering.
Sinking. Yeah, I didn't know if you heard what I was saying there, but we used to, when I was on the fire department there, we had the boat. It was weird. We had the boat. The next department over was responsible for the lake. Made no sense.
Right. That's right.
They're supposed to call us for the boat.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, we had the same radio channel, and they'd get calls on the lake, and why didn't you guys call us for the boat? Oh, well, Joe brings his boat when we get a water call. And I'm thinking, like, that's fine. Like, great. You're using resources you have. But at the same time, like, if something ever went wrong or Joe's boat sank, I just think that's a huge, murky, pun not intended, uh, ordeal about, like, well, who pays for Joe's boat? I'm sure Joe's boat insurance company doesn't know he's using it for firefighting or rescue activities, right? You don't bring your own fire truck to a fire, although Paul would love to. Paul used to bring his own fire truck to the fire hall. I remember that a couple times, but
I didn't take it to fires.
No, you drove it to the fire hall to get
That's
on the
right.
real fire trucks to go there.
That's
But
right. Yeah, it was a
it's
demo.
yeah. But so I always thought, well, why are you using your own boat? Call our boat. And if our boat's not good enough, then let's make a case to get a better boat. And it can be in your fire hall for all I care.
And we've already talked about they took the boat out of service. One recommendation was, of course, is that it's recommended to undertake a review of the crewing and staff qualification requirements for boats within the service and determine appropriate levels of familiarization, training, and emergency operations status that include the requirement within revised procedures and guidance. They were going to introduce a method of recording time spent as helmsman of its boats, implement a minimum number of hours required to maintain competency. I think that all makes good sense, and it's exactly
It makes total sense. But when you make rules like that, you have to follow them, right?
And you have to have the
Because
funding and
if
staffing.
you say you need to have 15 hours of training before you can operate this boat at a call, okay? Well, now the boat rescue call comes in, and it's more a problem on volunteer department. The boat rescue call comes in, and everyone shows up, and I got 12 hours. Nobody else has any. What do we do?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Or nobody has any, but I like, if you're gonna make rules like that, which I completely agree, you have to make, you have to follow them, and you need to figure it out at that time. What do we do when we can't have a 15-hour? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's we used to argue in Lacombe about training probies, and everyone said, well, there's no probies on the first truck. They all go on the other truck. And I'd say, well, what if all that shows up is probies? What are we supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we take them. Well, then we're breaking our rule. So why is it a rule?
That's right. Yeah. Can't break it when you want to. Do what I say. Do what I do, not what I say, or the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've wrapped this one up. So, everybody, thank you very much for listening to another emergency traffic podcast. We appreciate your interest, and we hope you find these interesting and informative. Give us a like, a star, a thumbs up on the app that you use to listen to us. You can follow us on Twitter or Facebook page, or you can email us at the emergencytrafficpodcast@gmail.com. Let's be safe out there. Hopefully this prevents an accident in your future.
Yeah, stay low and go. I don't know if that applies to water rescue calls, but
no. I've got another one of these that happened in Montreal in October that I want to do as well. The report just came out.
Is it in English or French?
I translated it.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah. Okay. Catch you later. Thanks.